his thoughts get interrupted by Metroplex's and Starscream's screams syncing up. Metroplex screams, causing a massive earthquake. It's as if Cybertron itself is crumbling.
Go beyond! Plus!
Hey, what's up everyone? James here, and we are back. We are here. We have finally made it to the end of IDW's Transformers Shattered Glass. What a journey we have been on, and it's so fitting that in this final issue, we are focusing on my boy, my favorite Shattered Glass bot, heroic Soundwave. I'm not going to keep you guys waiting any longer. Let's get right into the action. So the story opens right where we left off, where the final battle for Metroplex continues to rage on. Soundwave is dragging an injured Megatron to safety as his mini cassettes cover him. Megatron tries to urge Soundwave to leave him and stop Ultra Magnus from controlling Metroplex. As Soundwave is stabilizing him, Megatron informs him of Flame War's discoveries, how Magnus has Optimus Prime captured and is set up for a procedure to be performed by Ratchet. After Soundwave patches up Megatron, he orders Ravage and the other cassettes to stay and protect Megatron as he marches toward Metroplex. Soundwave deduces that Magnus wants to become Optimus because it will be easier for him to sway Optimus's forces, especially the Loyalists, to fall under his command. Just to let you guys know, it is a lot deeper than that, and we will find that out later. In the meantime, we learn through Soundwave's inner monologue that he can hear what's really going on with Metroplex. That he isn't just waking, he is screaming in agony, and he hears not only Metroplex, but Starscream's cries as well. He gets distracted for a moment when he sees a bot being crushed beneath one of Metroplex's fingers. As he goes to help this bot, he is suddenly rammed from behind by one of the wreckers, Springer. Soundwave hits Springer with a sonic blast that knocks him out, and he then continues to charge toward the helpless bot. Now, if you're wondering why Soundwave knocked out Springer instead of landing a killing blow, it's because, as you'll see in this issue, Soundwave tries to avoid killing if he can. I wouldn't say he is a pacifist. For me, I thought of him as more like a Jedi, or Goku from DBZ, my favorite anime. He believes every life is worth something, and that everyone can be redeemed and changed. He won't kill you, but he will if he absolutely has to. Now, the pinned bot he saves is revealed to be Slicer, who fires his blaster at him, but luckily Soundwave was able to dodge it in time. Soundwave then uses his ability to hear thoughts on Slicer, and I love that Danny Lore is using this ability he had on the original show. He called it brain scan on the show, where an antenna would pop out of his head and he would have to scan his target. Whereas here, all he has to do is focus and listen, making it less mechanical and more natural, if that makes sense. Soundwave explains how it works, how he's able to do this. It's because thoughts are just sound tuned to a certain frequency. He can access it and understand its subsonic tones. When he listens to Slicers, he can hear how his thoughts are conflicted. They're filled with Soundwave's broadcasts, Ratchet, Ultra Magnus, and the Wreckers. He tells Slicer that Metroplex can't be controlled and that deep down he knows it's true. He heard Starscream and Metroplex's voices. Suddenly Springer awakens and charges toward Soundwave. When Soundwave hits him with a sonic blast to the knee, Slicer ends up shooting Springer with a blaster shot to the face. Initially, he is shocked that he killed a fellow Wrecker. Soundwave tries to help him cope with what he's done, but when he listens to Slicer's mind now, he can hear how quiet it is, how it's not conflicted anymore. Slicer says, "Let's go kill my boss, Mr. DJ." Even though Danny Lore has been kinda setting up Slicer's turn here for 2 issues, I know it's still going to seem abrupt to some of you. And I must admit, initially it did come across that way to me. But remember, he admires and respects Ratchet. To him, Soundwave is a lot similar to Ratchet. He also has been listening to Soundwave's radio frequencies through Blaster's head this entire time. And as we saw in the last issue, he has become attached to it. It seems like he's grown to admire and respect Soundwave. And to add on to that point, Soundwave even points out how he can hear his frequencies stuck in Slicer's head like a hit song. Now, having joined forces, Soundwave and Slicer climb up Metroplex. And what's cool here is once they reach an entrance, Soundwave uses Slicer's voice to catch Ricochet and Jazz off guard, and he gets the jump on them. He blasts Ricochet out of Metroplex and knocks out Jazz. Inside, Soundwave and Slicer traverse through Metroplex and come across the severed leg of Ultra Magnus. Initially, Slicer thinks there may have been complications with his surgery due to Metroplex moving, but this is where the story gets dark. The severed leg leads them to a morbid discovery. They find Ultra Magnus's body screaming threats it can't say because Ratchet disabled his voice box. Soundwave deduces the surgery must have worked, and he's quickly proven right when he gets a front row seat he wishes he could refuse. He and Slicer meet face to face with the Wreckers and Ultra Magnus in Optimus Prime's body. Before anyone points it out, yes, all they did was change his frame color from purple to blue and give him a long poleaxe, but I don't care. He looks freaking amazing. Also, what really makes this dark is since Magnus is in Optimus's body, that means Optimus is in Magnus's body screaming threats he can't say. Magnus talks some trash here when he meets with Soundwave. He tells Soundwave he thought Megatron would send one of his assassins or spies to take him out, not his grief counselor. Now, he says this because for those of you who've read or watched my video on issue 3 of the first Shatterglass series, we learned in that issue, Soundwave was operating beneath Gold City, running his underground Decepticon radio, still continuing his job as the morale officer of the Decepticons. He was helping bots deal with their trauma, depression, and PTSD. It's why I've personally dubbed him ever since then as Heroic Soundwave, the truest hero of the Decepticons. Soundwave does clap back at Magnus, saying, "You don't have the speech patterns down. Try more grunts, you've got the smugness." Now, Slicer acts like he is still one of the Wreckers, making it seem like he brought Soundwave before Magnus. Through his thoughts, he secretly conveys to Soundwave to keep talking. Suddenly, Magnus loses his balance, and Ratchet goes to help him, and reminds Magnus that they didn't finish running all the calibrations. Magnus pushes him back, telling him he's already figuring out how to compensate for what he calls a barbaric frame, and he has the Wreckers after all. This does beg the question, why did Magnus switch to Optimus's frame if he considers it barbaric? Remember this, because as I said earlier, it's much deeper. When Magnus orders Slicer to take out Soundwave, Slicer gets into Magnus's face, stepping between him and Soundwave. At that moment, Soundwave can hear Slicer beginning to broadcast his thoughts to him. Slicer tells him at his signal they have only a moment to knock out the Wreckers, not kill. He's being considerate of Soundwave. After they do, he's going to grab Ratchet and run. As Soundwave listens to Slicer's plans, his thoughts get interrupted by Metroplex's and Starscream's screams syncing up. He says if they line up, they both will be lost forever. Metroplex screams, causing a massive earthquake. It's as if Cybertron itself is crumbling. I love how the artist behind this series, Guido Guidi, drew this. It reminded me of when Gohan went Super Saiyan 2 for the first time in the DBZ series. As Metroplex is raging, everything inside of him begins to shake and collapse. Slicer and Soundwave use the chaos to make their move. Some rubble falls on Ultra Magnus, Slicer grabs Ratchet, and Soundwave begins to battle the Wreckers. Drift tells Soundwave he's outmatched, but Soundwave doesn't care. He grabs Tailgate and throws him at Drift. He's willing to do and face whatever he has to in order to save Metroplex and Starscream. Rodimus shoots Slicer, expressing to him how he's wanted to do that for a long time. He then shoots Ratchet, wanting Slicer to suffer more before he kills him. As Soundwave goes head to head with Drift, he sees Slicer is in trouble. Knowing he can't save Starscream alone and wanting to save as many as he can, he remembers all the horrors the Wreckers have committed and makes the only choice he can. He blasts a hole into Drift's chest. And it doesn't end there. He grabs one of his blades and hurls it into Rodimus's head. This was absolutely incredible. Soundwave cuts Jetfire free, and initially Jetfire wants to get payback on Slicer, but Soundwave reminds him that Starscream needs his help. They fly to Metroplex's spark chamber, and once they reach it, Jetfire is in awe of Starscream's spark. Soundwave tells him he'll sever the connection between Metroplex and Starscream's spark. After he does, he needs to take Starscream's spark to safety immediately. After the connection is successfully severed, Jetfire scoops up Starscream's spark. As Metroplex, now incapacitated, begins to topple, Jetfire flies away. At that moment, Magnus enters the chamber, and he strikes Soundwave so hard with his long poleaxe that it sends him flying out of Metroplex's cracked eye. He tells Soundwave he'll do what Optimus was too arrogant to do. The hit was so hard that Soundwave can't hear anything. But when Magnus leaps toward him about to land the killing blow, Soundwave meets him with a boot to the face. As they battle outside on the eye of Metroplex, this is where we learn the real reason why Ultra Magnus stole Optimus's body. Soundwave says, "I can read your mind. You had to steal Optimus's skin because you were too scared to lead without it." Now, on one hand, this does make sense. Because remember, at first, Ultra Magnus was looked at as just the legal advisor and intelligence officer working under Optimus. No one feared or respected him. However, on the other hand, I would argue he grew to have that reputation. He successfully led the Wreckers, and their reputation was well known. They carried out deadly missions, took out the entire Senate, and performed Imperata on Shockwave. And Magnus himself beat the hell out of Optimus. I would even argue his size and skull face look he had is way more intimidating than Optimus's frame. So to me, Magnus already had everything he needed to sway all of Optimus's forces under him. Now, the argument I'll make against myself is maybe the great tragedy of Magnus is no matter what he did or gained, still didn't change how he viewed or felt about himself. Soundwave's words enrage Magnus. He headbutts Soundwave, and just as he's about to throw Soundwave off of Metroplex, he is suddenly shot in the chest. Magnus drops Soundwave and falls to his death. Soundwave triangulates the shot, and it leads to a bot who said he would run, Slicer. Metroplex continues to topple as Soundwave holds on for dear life. Luckily, at that moment, Laserbeak flies in and saves him. After the battle, and after many cycles of loss, the Decepticons are finally victorious. Soundwave says in his inner monologue, "There's so much horror and death on the battlefield, more than I can process, but we all had our reasons. I went into battle because there's life on the other side of the war, for all of us, if we're brave enough to face it, if we are determined to live with ourselves and what we've become. It may get worse before it can get better, but I will never stop believing peace is worth it, that Cybertron is worth fighting for." The story ends with the last Autobot warlord, Prowl, looking upon the battlefield, and Soundwave and the Decepticons looking at the sunset as they continue to fight for a better tomorrow. And that is the end of Transformers Shattered Glass, and the final issue of IDW's 17-year run of Transformers. Well, I hope you all enjoyed the video and this series. This may be the end of IDW, but this isn't the end of our journey. I'm still going to remaster the first series of Shattered Glass, and we're going to still continue our journey covering the entire universe. Other than that, I hope all of you have an awesome day, and always remember, every day to transform and go beyond. See you later, Beyonders.